Hey guys, welcome to this session on how to become a full stack developer by Intellipaat. In this session, we'll learn how to become a full stack developer, the skills you need to become a full stack developer, and the pathway onto how to acquire those skills. My name is Anirudh, and in this session, we'll take a look at all the technologies that you may need to learn to become a full stack developer. So let's start the session. But before we do, please subscribe to our channel, click on the notification bell icon to never miss another update. So let's run through the agenda for today. At the beginning, we'll take a look at what is full stack development. Then we'll take a look at why become a full stack developer. Then we'll take a look at the components of full stack development. Then we'll look at the front-end development, and then we'll take a look at the back-end development. Then we'll take a look at the tools that the full stack developers use to build full stack applications. Then we'll take a look at the skills that are required for you to attain to become a full stack developer. And at the end, we'll take a look at the resources that you can use to acquire the skills that we'll be taking a look at. So let's begin. So what is full stack development? Well, a full stack developer is a web developer that can work on both the front end and the back end applications. So a full stack developer builds the front end and then builds the back end and then connects them together so that they can work well with each other. An analogy that might help you to understand what the front end and the back end is you can think of a clock. So if you have a digital clock, everything that you see on the screen of your clock, the numbers that's telling the time, the seconds, the minutes, the hours, and everything else that you can see, that's the front end that you can interact with, that you can see. The back end is the internal circuitry. That's the back end that you cannot see. However, it works with the front end to give you the desired output. So that's the difference between a front end and the back end of the application, and a full stack developer builds both of them and then connects them together so that you can use the application or the organization can use the application. So why become a full stack developer? Well, a full stack developer is one of the highest paying job roles that you can have today. As you can see, the average salary of a full stack developer in India is 9 lakhs per annum. The average salary in the US is around $110,000 per annum. Not only just the salary, but you can also use the full stack the skills that you need to become a full stack developer, and you can use those skills to build awesome applications. And not just web applications, the technologies that you learn to become a full stack developer can also be used to build native mobile applications such as Android or iOS applications, as well as desktop applications that can run on all the major platforms like Windows, Linux, and Macintosh. And there are a lot of job opportunities for the full stack development role as well. Organizations tend to hire people with skills both front end and back end. So if you know both the front end and the back end and know how to work with these technologies, you will have a lot of opportunities to get hired. These are some of the companies that hire full stack developers. There are others, but these are some of the top IT companies in India, and these are some of the most sought after IT companies as well. So if you become a full stack developer or at least gain the skills, then you can get a job in any of these companies. And if you wish to work in any of these companies or any other company as a full stack developer, stick with me till the end of the slides and I'll guide you through the resources and a pathway through which you can learn these technologies. So let's take a look at the components of full stack development. At its core, full stack development is basically divided into two components, the front end and the back end. So as we discussed, the front end is the part of the web application that the user interacts with. So the buttons, the forms, the layout, the entire web page that is loaded in your browser, that's the front end, everything you see and interact with. The back end, on the other hand, is the application that runs on the server. It manages the data that is sent to it by the front end, and you interact with the front end to provide this application with the data. So when you enter into the registration form and then fill in the data, the form that you see, that's the front end, and when you click submit and the data is sent to the server, that server is the back end. It will take the data, validate it, and then save it into the database. That's what the backend does. So now let's take a look at these components in depth. Let's first look at the front end. So the front end of the application is built with the help of a lot of technologies. So both front end and back end are a vast fields and have a lot of technologies that you need to learn to become proficient in these components. So let's take a look at these technologies. The first one is HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It is used to define the structure of your web page. So anything that you see on the web is written in HTML, or at least the output that you see on the browser is converted from HTML. So you need to know HTML. It's the absolute bedrock of web development. Then there's CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is used to style your web pages by defining certain attributes or properties on elements. So you can write style sheets that tell the browser to take an element and then increase its size, change its font, change the background color, so on and so forth. You can mix and match style sheets to create the layout of your entire website and make your website look pretty. Then there's JavaScript. JavaScript is a scripting language and is used to make your web application more interactive. So when you click submit on a form and it's sent back to the server, and then you get back the response, JavaScript is involved in that. When you click on a button and a notification pops up, JavaScript is involved in that as well. So anything in your web application that seems interactive is probably done using JavaScript. After learning JavaScript, you also need to learn a few libraries. So if you want to understand what a library is simply some code written by a developer so that you don't have to write the same code to perform the same task. So for instance, there is a library called RxJS. It's one of the most popular libraries, and it's used to sort of make your web application more responsive by taking care of the communication between your web application and the backend of your web application. So there are many libraries such as jQuery, Lodash, RxJS, and many others. You don't need to know all the libraries that are available out there, but you do need to be comfortable with some of the popular ones, and you need to know how to use them, how to learn about them, how to read the documentation, so on and so forth. Then there's CSS preprocessors. So CSS is pretty powerful in itself, however it lacks certain features. So features like variables or mix-ins or functions or nesting, these are the kind of things that you would expect CSS to have, however it doesn't. So you use preprocessors and then write your CSS code using the capabilities that the preprocessor provides. Then you compile that preprocessor into CSS, and that CSS is then used by your web application. So CSS preprocessors allow you to write more advanced CSS. There are many preprocessors available out there. Some of the more popular ones are called Sass and Less. Then there's build tools. As we know that the entire web application runs in browser and the communication happens over the internet. Now, if you want your web application to load faster and communicate with the browser quickly, you need to make sure that everything in your web browser that gets sent back from the server is as small as possible, so that even if the network connection is not very good, you still get a good performance and good experience. And build tools allow us to do that. So what build tools do is that they remove all the white space from the code that you have. So all your JavaScript file, all your CSS file, they are minified. If you have multiple files, all of them are combined into one file so that the server only needs to make one request to the web application only needs to make one request to the server and get back the response. And many other tasks that can have an impact on your performance, whether you're developing or whether you are running it in production. These kinds of things are taken care of by these build tools. They automate these kinds of tasks, and there are many build tools available. Some of the more popular ones are Gulp, Grunt. There's also one called Brunch. And again, like I said, you don't need to know all of them, but getting comfortable with one of them is a very good thing to do. Then there are frameworks. Now, a framework can be thought of as a piece of code that allows you to skip over commonly done tasks. So when you're building a web application, especially modern web applications, you need to take care of certain things like users browsing history. You need to take care of how the user is navigating. When he presses the back button of your application, where is he going to be routed to? What is he going to see when he presses this over that? All of these things can be a bit cumbersome to write again and again, and if you're building multiple applications, writing all of these repetitive tasks again and again could get a little difficult. So frameworks allow you to not write these tasks because these are already written in the framework. All you have to do is focus on your application. So there are many frameworks out there. Some of the more popular ones are Angular, React, Vue. There are many others, but since these are the most popular ones, you will get more and more benefits out of learning these first. So now let's take a look at the technologies in the backend. Now I can understand that there's a lot of technologies in front end as well as backend. Don't be overwhelmed by them. You don't need to be an expert in all the technologies that I have mentioned or in all the sub technologies that I have mentioned as well. You do need to know some, you do need to have some familiarity with all of these technologies. So what I would suggest is that you stick with me till the end of the slides and I'll show you how you can go about learning them. So let's take a look at some of the technologies that you might need to know to build a backend. So the backend of the application is basically just a bunch of services that are running on servers, that are databases and caching systems working together so that your user requests some data and these services provide them with the data. So the first thing that you need to know is a programming language. These backend servers are programmed to respond to the URL requests. So there are many languages that you can learn. One of these is PHP. There's Node.js, which is basically JavaScript running on the servers. So if you know JavaScript, you can learn both the front end and the back end. There's Python, there's Ruby, there's Java. There are many other languages that you can use to build the back end. However, these are the most popular ones. And so if you learn one of these, you will be good to go. Next, we have database management systems or DBMS. So your application needs to store the database, and so your application needs to store some of the data inside the database. Whenever user sends some data, you need to manipulate it and then store it inside the database, and this allows you to have persistence. So whenever the user wants to get the data back, you can look into the database, get that data back, and then send it back to the user. So there are many databases available. Some of them are MongoDB, MySQL, Neo4j. MySQL is an SQL database, while MongoDB and Neo4j are NoSQL databases. So you do need to be aware of the differences between the two and when should you use one over the other, and how you can use these or one of the chosen databases with the language that you chose or the framework that you chose. Then there are frameworks. Again, like front-end, frameworks do the same thing in the back-end. However, the tasks that they try to take the repetition out of, they are different, since front-end and back-end do different tasks. So in the back end, you need to do some common tasks like logging, writing log files, saving things to the database, managing the database connection, closing and opening the connection, and avoiding memory leaks, and so on and so forth. These are the kind of things that a framework can take care of. Now, depending on the language you choose, you do have many options for frameworks. For instance, if you choose Node.js, you can use Express.js. If you chose PHP, you can use Laravel. And if you chose Python, you can use Django. There are other languages and frameworks available, like for instance, Spring is a framework popular with Java, and Ruby on Rails is a framework popular with the Ruby programming language. So depending on the language you choose, you have a lot of options when it comes to choosing a framework. You do need to know what a REST API is, how to build a REST API. To give you a quick overview, a REST API is basically a web service that when you send a request to it, it sends back some data in a format that your programming language or your program can understand. There are many formats, but most popular ones are JSON, XML, and YAML. If you're planning to use one of those, I would recommend that you use JSON for your web services or your REST APIs, because JSON is by far the most popular data exchange format used on the internet, and many languages have built-in support for parsing and encoding and decoding data to JSON format. And a caching system. Caching is mostly used to improve the performance of your backend or your entire web application. So caching allows you to reduce the time it takes to do certain tasks. So for instance, let's say that you have a user. He requests for some data that the backend server needs to provide. The backend server looks at the database, makes a query, gets back the data. However, making queries to databases is a computationally expensive task and it takes time. The next user also asks for the same data. So instead of looking into the database and fetching the same data, which does take some time, what you can do is save the result that the previous user asked, and when the next user asks for the same data, you send it back to him. Thus, you reduce the computation that you need to perform. Caching systems do similar things, however, they do it in a more scalable way. So there are many caching systems available out there. There's Redis, there's Memcached, there are many others as well. Redis and Memcache are by far the most popular. However, you can use other caching systems as well. Just make sure that you know which one you're using, how you can integrate it with the framework and the language that you're choosing, and whether or not your language supports the caching system that you are going to be using. Now let's take a look at some of the tools that a full stack developer would use to build applications. So as a full stack developer who's working in a team with other full stack developers, there are a few tools that could help you and your team increase productivity, transparency, and figure out who made what changes in the code base. One of those tools is a version control system, also shortened as VCS. So a version control system is basically a system that allows you to keep track of the changes and keep track of who made what changes at what time, and what do those changes bring about in your code base. So if you're working in a team of 10 developers, without a version control system, it could be quite hard to figure out who made what changes in the code base and keeping your entire code base in sync. Similarly, if you're using a version control system, it becomes much easier, which is why teams tend to prefer using version control systems. There are many version control systems that you could use. Git is by far the most popular. There's also SVN, which is short form for Subversion. It's created by Apache Foundation and it's quite old. So if you're choosing to use one, I would suggest that you use Git because it's quite new, quite popular. Many of the big companies use them. Then there's code editors. This is the tool that you would predominantly be using. Your entire work would be done in these softwares. So you can use a code editor of your choice. If you have already got familiarity with some of the code editors, you can use them as well. However, some of the most popular ones and some of the most easiest ones to learn are Visual Studio Code, Sublime Text, Atom, and so on. So you can use any code editor that you like. However, choosing one that your team uses would be much more beneficial. So now let's take a look at the skills that are required for you to become a web developer or a full stack web developer. So this is a long list. So don't be intimidated by all the things that I'm going to tell you that you need to learn. It's not necessary for you to know all the technologies inside out. You do need to have some familiarity with some of these technologies, and much of it would depend on the application that you're trying to build. However, having a good understanding of these technologies is helpful, but you don't need to know the entire code base or entire list of what I'm going to present now in depth. So just keep that in mind. And if you wish to learn all of these technologies, like I said, stick with me till the end of the slides, and I'll tell you about some of the resources that you could use. So these are some of the skills that are required. The absolute basics is the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If you want to build the most basic application, you do need to know HTML. To make it look better, you need to know CSS. And for it to work, to do something, you need to know JavaScript. So if you know these three things, you can build a very, very simple and basic web application pretty easily. Then there's build tools. As we have discussed, they allow you to minify your code, they allow you to make changes to your code, they allow you to concatenate them, so on and so forth. There's a lot more that these could do, a lot more for me to cover than I could cover in this video. But if you wish to learn these technologies, there's Gulp, there's, like I said, Brunch, there's Grunt. There are many other build tools as well. However, these are some of the most popular ones on the web, so I would suggest that you pick one and get familiar with them. You don't need to know, like I said, you don't need to know them by heart, but you do need to have some familiarity and know how to use them if the need ever occurs. Then there are front-end libraries and frameworks. So there are many libraries. Like I mentioned, there's jQuery, there's RxJS, you can use them. But if you wish to use a front-end framework, these are some of the more popular ones. There's Angular, there's Vue, there's React. You can just pick one. However, if you're confused between which one should you pick, you can either try all of them and figure out whether you are comfortable with one of these, or maybe you're not comfortable with any of these, in which case you need to find another framework. But give a try to all of these and figure out which one works for you the best. Then there's a backend language that you need to know as well. So some of these languages are Java, Python, PHP. These are some of the more popular ones. Java is usually used in the enterprise side of the applications. So when you're building an enterprise application, Java is most usually the one language that is used there. However, PHP and Python are also quite popular. PHP is used in WordPress. So if you have used WordPress before, then you know how to use PHP. And you can use PHP to build other applications as well, not just confined to WordPress. And Python has a lot of frameworks that you can use to build web applications as well. Then you need to know a database management system. Now you could choose an SQL database such as MySQL, Microsoft SQL, PostgreSQL, and there are many others. Or you could choose a NoSQL database. There are many forms of NoSQL database. So for instance, there's MongoDB. MongoDB is a document-based database. And there's Neo4j, which is a graph-based database. I'm not going to go into the details about the different types of NoSQL databases and what the difference between those types is. You can research them on your own. However, do make sure that you, before choosing the database management system, you know how to use them, you know how to issue queries, how to save data, and also, most importantly, you know how to connect them to the language or the framework that you're using to build the backend of your application. And you need to know REST APIs, how to build one, how to use one, how to make your front end be able to communicate and get the response back and then use the response in your front end. So there are many ways to build a REST API, but one of the most popular data exchange formats, like I've already told you, is JSON. So you do need to know JSON, or you could use XML, or you could use YAML. However, I would suggest that you use JSON because it's the most popular one out there. Many other developers would know JSON, so it would be easier for you to communicate with them about the languages that you're using. And then there's DevOps. And let me just say that DevOps is not something that you need to know by heart. You don't need to know entirety of what DevOps is. Many companies have their own DevOps team, so they could take care of it. However, you do need to know what DevOps is, what are the technologies that are used in DevOps, and what do these technologies do, and maybe some familiarity with how to use them. So there's Docker, there's Jenkins, there's Chef. There are many other technologies that are used in DevOps. However, you could learn just one of these three, or maybe all of these three a little bit, and you can get by. So if you're stuck around till, like I've told you, and this is the end of the slides, now let's take a look at some of the resources that I would suggest that you use to become a full stack developer. So one of my favorite quotes of all time is by Mr. Stephen Hawking. It says, "Nothing is better than reading and gaining more and more knowledge." So with that in mind, if you wish to learn more about the technologies that I just mentioned, or maybe any other technology, we have our YouTube channel, and you could subscribe to it. You can subscribe to the notifications, and our content developers keep bringing you some of the most important things that you need to know and the content based on that. So if you're a visual learner, you like watching video, you like watching following along, you could use the YouTube videos that we provide you for free. Or you could use the blogs and the tutorials that we write on our website, intellipaat.com. These blogs have code samples. These tutorials have code samples that you could use. You could also follow along with the tutorials and build things on your own. This could give you a good hands-on practice as well. So if you use these resources, you could learn a lot. However, if you wish to get a bit more in depth and a bit more hands-on, then let me show you a course that I would suggest that you use. So this is the course on full stack web development on intellipaat.com. The course teaches you everything, and it starts from scratch. So as you can see, we start from absolute basics. We start from HTML, we teach you jQuery, JavaScript, CSS, then we learn Node.js, which is the backend language. Like I've said, it uses JavaScript to write the backend. So if you know JavaScript, you could be very familiar with these. Then there's Angular, which is the front-end framework, MongoDB, which is the NoSQL database, DevOps, and then there's SQL as well. And you would be taught a lot in these courses, and not just taught, but you would also be given problems to test your skills, to assess where you are and how much you've learned, and you will also be taught through building projects. This is one of the most important things that you can do, getting hands-on knowledge, so that when you do get a job, you are not completely unaware of how to get things done. So these are all the things that you will be taught. This is the learning path. You can take a look at this and understand how you would be taught all the things. And as you can see, in 26 weeks, you could become a full stack developer. And after you have completed the entire course and passed all the exams and the quizzes, then you get a certificate. This is what the certificate would look like, and this certificate is an important thing because it could help you get identified in a crowd. So many people try to get a job as a full stack developer. However, recruiters try to follow on people who have certificates so that they can prove that they have learned these things and they're not just applying without any knowledge. And if you do get this certificate, this is valid in and accepted in a lot of the IT companies, around 85 multinational companies such as IBM, Amazon, Ericsson, Sony, Musicma, and many others. So if you get this certificate, you would definitely have an advantage over the people who don't. You can look at the reviews as well to make up your mind. As you can see that this is one of the most highly reviewed courses on our website and people like it very much. And I'm sure you have questions when it comes to these kinds of things. We have an FAQ section where you can take a look at some of the most frequently asked questions that people ask when it comes to this course. However, if this does not satisfy your inquisitiveness, there are other ways to ask questions as well, which I will mention. But before that, since you stuck around and watched the entire presentation with me, I'd like to give you a gift. You can use this coupon code YouTube30 to get a flat 30% discount on any course today. So this code is valid for today, and this is valid for only the YouTube viewers that are viewing right now. So when you if you buy the course today, you can use the YouTube30 coupon code and get flat 30% off on any course that you wish to use. Now, like I said, if you have any other questions, you could contact us on these numbers as they are being displayed on the screen. For India, we have a number. For outside India, you could use the toll-free number that's mentioned. Or if you wish to follow along your query using email, we have sales@intellipaat.com. These are all 24/7 available, so you could chat with us, you could call us, you could mail us at any time you wish to. Our course advisors are always there to help you, to guide you, and to get you to the course that you need the most, and the course that will help you get your next job. So, and we also have an online community, so you could ask your technical questions and clarify your technical doubts there as well. So with that, thank you so much guys for sticking around with me, and I hope this has been helpful and fun for you as it has been for me. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.